President Biden and House Democrats are ready, willing, and able to work in a bipartisan fashion with our Republican colleagues on any issue, including fixing our broken immigration system and addressing the challenges at the border.
But of course, the State of the Union is not strong. And everybody around the country knows it, and everybody in this room knows it.
President Biden set to deliver the State of the Union address tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. The high-profile speech comes at a crucial time for Biden's campaign as he prepares for a rematch against presumptive Republican nominee and former president Donald Trump. Current Decision Desk HQ projections show Trump ahead of Biden by 2.1%. Let's check in now with my friend and colleague and author of the Hill's 1230 report, Cate Martell. Cate, what do you expect from the State of the Union?
Yeah, big night tonight. And I basically expected Biden to treat this like a campaign event, but with the pomp and circumstance of a sitting president. This is Biden's big opportunity to tout his record uninterrupted during a primetime address, with millions of people watching. So I expect him to talk about the economy. I do expect to hear the border. The content absolutely matters, but I think what matters even more tonight is how President Biden delivers it. I think most people that are tuning in to watch the State of the Union address want to see his energy and his demeanor. They're looking to see, does he have the stamina to last for another 4 years as president? So I think that's what I'm expecting to see. Does he make any major gaffes tonight? And can he reassure voters that he does have the energy to serve another 4 years as president?
So that's one of my three things that I'm watching for tonight. And you mentioned the no gaffes, the mental acuity, the mental sharpness. Obviously, that is one of the three. But the other two are twofold. First is economics. Millions of Americans do not feel that the economy has recovered. They feel that inflation is way too high. They feel that immigration represents a economic crisis as much as a national security crisis. What does President Biden have to do on the economy?
Yeah, on the economy, I think that, there's been some reporting from Axios that President Biden is going to address the fact that he understands inflation is raging and that people are upset about prices. But at the same time, he's going to try to draw these contrasts by saying, look how it was under the Trump administration, and try to make the argument that he is still better to be commander in chief than his Republican rival. So I think we're expecting him here to try to tout the economy in however he can, in whatever ways he can, address the fact that prices are high, but still try to draw a contrast between him and a Trump administration.
Comparatively speaking, inflation not as high as other nations, including China as well as Europe. And obviously on immigration, I expect the president to talk about the bipartisan deal that was sunk by conservatives. So right there, I think what he's going to, when he articulates about immigration, could be a divisive moment in the chamber with cheers and boos, to be honest, specifically around immigration. Then the other major thing that I'm watching for tonight is on foreign policy. I expect President Biden to talk specifically like Vice President Kamala Harris did over the weekend, in which she commemorated the Bloody Sunday anniversary, talking and calling for there to be a ceasefire. I would anticipate that President Biden speaks and echoes that same phraseology. What does he have to do on foreign policy tonight?
Foreign policy really, really matters for President Biden tonight. And we saw that in the past week, first in Michigan, with more than 100,000 Democratic voters choosing to write in uncommitted rather than voting for Biden, and more than 45,000 then in Minnesota doing the same. That Democrats particularly are watching for what President Biden's message is in Gaza and in the Israel war that they're currently engaged in. So I expect him to address it and to talk about the humanitarian efforts. That's a positive spin that he can have, that, it is something that the Biden administration is actively working on to try to alleviate some of the suffering there. But I think his tone is going to be really, really important. And that however this speech was written, that the verbiage in discussing this conflict is going to be extremely, extremely important.
And President Biden set to hit the campaign trail after tonight's State of the Union address. He will head to Delco, my hometown, in Pennsylvania tomorrow on Friday, and then he has a sprint across several campaign states over the weekend. Meanwhile, on the Republican side of things, Senator Cate Britt, she is a junior senator from the state of Alabama. She is taking the national spotlight to deliver the GOP response after President Biden's address, right after that address. What should we know about Senator Britt?
Yeah, she's an interesting pick. She's actually the youngest female Republican in the Senate, and she's a big rising star within the party. She's only been in the Senate for 2 years, and she's already a part of Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's leadership team, and she already sits on the coveted Senate Appropriations Committee. She's somebody I think that we're going to be hearing a lot from in the future, and she was a pretty interesting pick. I think that Republicans are hoping to draw this major contrast between, seeing the 81-year-old president by then bringing in a young Senate Republican to have a younger, fresher face that she can be more energetic. So I think that was a careful calculation in hoping to draw this contrast in energy. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot from her over the next few years.
Meanwhile, former President Trump continues to solidify the party, the Republican Party behind him, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who has now backed Trump. He said that whomever the nominee is going to be, that he would end up supporting that person. And in this case, it's Trump, so he is backing him. But the relationship between McConnell and Trump, really an interesting one, especially since McConnell has announced that he will not be holding on to his leadership position at the end of this year.
Yeah, it really seems like McConnell swallowed his pride in issuing the endorsement of former President Trump. They had a pretty bitter falling out a few years ago, and they've had a pretty icy relationship ever since. He did say that he would support whoever the eventual nominee would be, so it wasn't particularly surprising, but knowing their relationship, I think just adds this extra element to it. And, McConnell's departure represents this major shift within the Republican Party, that McConnell was the leader for so long, and he represented, similar to the Reagan type of Republican, traditional conservative, fiscal conservative, hawkish on foreign policy. And now the Republican Party is Trump's, and it's leaning into different types of policy areas. So the fact that McConnell has stepped down and then endorsed former President Trump just shows you this evolution that we've seen over the past 10 years of the Republican Party since Trump first took the stage.
So, Kate Martell, on the one hand, McConnell is backing Trump, but the biggest question becomes, will Nikki Haley end up supporting Trump? And depending on which state, the 20 to 40% of Republicans in the state who have backed her. And she says that she is not sure. So what is your reporting and what are your sources telling you about whether Haley will, in fact, endorse Trump?
That is exactly the question that we are all watching, Kevin, because over the past few months, we really see her harden her attacks on former President Trump, that for her to turn around immediately and endorse him did not surprise me. I think the way that this story unfolds over the next few months, I wouldn't be surprised if ultimately she does. But you make an interesting point that even though she didn't win many races with the state party, the state races, that she still did bring in between 20 and 40% of votes in a lot of states. And these are Republicans and independents who Trump has never polled well with. That this is a huge block of the Republican Party and with independents, that I think it's really going to matter where that goes. And that could end up deciding the election. So if she does endorse him, I think it'll make a big, big difference to Trump. If she does not, I think I've seen some polling that, some of her supporters will go to Biden. I expect most of them will ultimately continue to vote Republican. But with some of the tight margins in some of these states, if she does not, that could actually have a very real difference in some of these swing states.
Well, she's also got the data. And you know this, Kate, and we've been talking about this off air for a while now. It's not just the endorsement, folks. It's not just the moment of her getting on a stage and saying what she's going to do. Her campaign has voter data, and it has data right now on independent voters and Republican voters who are against former President Trump. And another organization that has that data is No Labels. This is the third-party presidential movement that has gained ballot access in a host of different states. And they say that they are going to announce some type of candidate in the coming weeks. This will also have an impact, Kate Martell. What do we know about when this announcement could potentially be coming?
We're expecting the delegates to vote this week in deciding whether to move forward with a ballot in the fall. It looks like that they probably will have some type of bipartisan ballot. Unclear who that's going to be. No Labels has been very tight-lipped about who they would choose. Nikki Haley obviously comes to mind because she does fill in the gap with these independents, but she has said repeatedly she's not interested because the No Labels ticket would be bipartisan, both a Republican and a Democrat. And she said, I'm not looking to run with a Democrat. I'm a Republican. So she's a name that's come to mind. The former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan has come to mind, but now he's running for the Senate. And Joe Manchin, the Democratic senator of West Virginia, who has announced he's not running for re-election. He's also somebody that comes to mind, but said he's not interested in running for president. So the big question is who actually that would be. But also, I think the big problem and challenge for no labels is that typically third parties tend to be spoilers, that they're taking away votes from either side. And I think both Republicans and Democrats should be concerned about who no labels would pull votes from, depending on who ends up on this ticket. So
it sounds like what you're saying, though, is if they decide to run, that they're going to make an impact. And I think that's what, my sources in Trump world as well as in Biden world are both very concerned about, is because the impact that no labels represents and the variable that no labels would play in shaking up the dynamics of the race is so incredibly unknown. I was just talking to Bob Cusack the other day, editor-in-chief of The Hill, and he even said, where are the polls that show what would happen if there was a no labels ticket? We don't even know who that would be, which names, and they haven't been polling. And so all of this would really inject a sense of unpredictability into a race, but other polls suggest that the public is craving it. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. It would be truly unprecedented if that were to happen. Trump says he wants to debate Biden. Will no labels get a threshold, a unity ticket get a threshold, and be able to participate in the debate at a presidential level? That is not something that the public has seen in more than 10 years at least. I can't do the quick math, but at least 10 years since there's been a third-party presidential candidate on that stage, Ross Perot era. So a lot to consider, folks, as we head into tonight's State of the Union and this looming announcement from No Labels that ultimately could really impact the status quo. My thanks to my friend, my colleague, Cate Martell. Nobody does it better. Subscribe to her newsletter. It is my favorite newsletter in all of Washington. It's The Hill's 1230 Report. Thank you, Cate.
Thanks, Kevin.
Congress is moving quickly to avoid a partial government shutdown. With the deadline looming, the House approved a $450 billion spending package on Wednesday. The six-bill package now heads to the Senate, and it must have the president's signature by Friday night to avoid a partial government shutdown. This is just one of two spending deadlines. The other is coming up quickly on March 22nd. Alabama fertility clinics are now restarting IVF treatments. That's due to state lawmakers passing a bill to protect patients and clinics from legal liability. The state's three major IVF providers paused services in response to the state Supreme Court's recent ruling that frozen embryos are considered children. No deal. Negotiators for the Hamas terrorist organization have once again left discussions in neighboring Egypt. That means that a short-term ceasefire before the month of Ramadan is highly unlikely. The U.S., Egypt, and Qatar have all been trying to broker a 6-week ceasefire deal that includes the release of 40 hostages held in Gaza, all before the start of the Muslim Holy Month. The negotiations come as worldwide calls for a ceasefire grow louder and more frequent, even coming from Vice President Kamala Harris. Ramadan begins on Sunday. Former Trump Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin is helping to bail out New York Community Bank. He is leading a $1 billion cash infusion after the bank's stock price fell as much as 45% last week. That drop was in response to a report that said NYCB was looking for outside investors. The bank has also made a change in the C-suite to regain investor confidence. They've named Joseph Otting as the new CEO. Otting worked under Mnuchin in both the Treasury Department and in the private sector.
This is a historic moment for Sweden. It's historic for our alliance. It's historic for the transatlantic relationship. Our NATO alliance, our defensive alliance, is now stronger and larger than it's ever been.
NATO has a new member. Sweden joined the Transatlantic Military Alliance Thursday morning, officially ending decades of neutrality for the Scandinavian country. It comes after Hungary, the final member holdout, ratified Sweden's admission earlier this week. To mark their addition to the alliance, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson will be President Biden's guest of honor at his State of the Union address on Thursday. Sweden follows Finland as the second country to join NATO since Russia's invasion of Ukraine now more than 2 years ago. And that's it for today's Daily Debrief. My name is Kevin Cirilli. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.